It took nearly 5 whole years, but Bayonetta 3 is finally here. Originally announced towards the end of 2017, the third entry in the Bayonetta franchise had a lot of fans excited. The original was a cult classic, and Platinum Games went and refined it on the Wii U with Bayonetta 2, adding new elements while polishing up older ones, and adding in more bombastic, over-the-top set pieces that made players jump from their seats in excitement. So hopes were high that Bayonetta 3 would continue this trend, and oh boy, did it deliver. Bayonetta 3 is a game practically built around its set pieces. The game at its core is still a character action game and functions very much as it previously did. Bayonetta beats up enemies with both light and heavy attacks as well as ranged attacks, and the focus is to rack up combos to pull off even stronger and more exciting moves. While the default weapons are Bayonetta's 4 pistols, she can equip a plethora of different items from a club to a chain, and these all provide their own unique playstyles for combat. This is all the standard Bayonetta fare, however. What makes combat a real set piece this time are the new Infernal Summons. Bayonetta can now use magic to summon one of her many demonic beasts to fight alongside her. Each of these have their own skill trees and combos, and they deal massive damage. The trade-off here is that Bayonetta is vulnerable while these attacks happen, but they are well worth doing, because bringing out Madame Butterfly or Gamora to beat down enemies while Bayonetta dances in the foreground of the screen is so much fun. It's like having a pet Kaiju monster to fight alongside. Speaking of Kaijus, the game has a Kaiju boss battle to wrap up its first story arc. Let me say that again, its first story arc ends in 2 gigantic monsters fighting over the streets of a destroyed Tokyo, and you get to play this. It has a completely different playstyle to what you've done previously, and it is such a spectacle to behold. It also perfectly sums up Bayonetta 3. It is a game of spectacle. No chapter goes by without some kind of major gameplay shift and over-the-top action set piece that most games out there would reserve for their final boss fights. It doesn't just keep the game at a 9 or a 10 on the excitement scale, it revs it up to 100, and this just works. You can tell that Platinum Games is having a lot of fun with this, from surfing down a Tokyo river with boats for skates, or fighting a werewolf inside the Platinum Games office itself. It's just a lot of silly fun. And that's just when you play with Bayonetta. In the previous games, occasionally the player would swap to playing as Jeanne for specific moments, but she played pretty much exactly the same as Bayonetta did. But in this game, players will be swapping between Bayonetta, Jeanne, and newcomer Viola as you progress through the story, and each have their own gameplay style. Viola, the Umbra Witch in training, takes a more defensive role than Bayonetta, relying on blocking and parrying instead of dodging in order to activate the series' iconic Witch Time. She can also summon a demon of her own, Cheshire, who will automatically attack the nearest enemy while the player can continue to fight as Viola, albeit with fists instead of her blade. It's great for dealing massive damage, and even though it looks similar to Bayonetta on the surface, it feels very different to play. And then there's Jeanne, and her stages are short but wildly different. Instead of a 3D action game, Bayonetta 3 becomes a 2D action stealth game, where the player sneaks through vents, dodges saw blades, and stealth kills enemies in order to make their way to the end of the level. It's just very different, and Bayonetta 3 does this constantly. These aren't even all the playable characters in this game. Some, like the young version of Bayonetta, will appear for short parkour-focused challenges, and others will get bigger set pieces throughout the game. The character action genre has always been an over-the-top affair, but Bayonetta 3 really takes it to the next level, and I am all here for it. If there is one thing I will criticise, it's that the points of no return aren't always obvious, and can sometimes trigger even though it doesn't feel like they should. Like the flag for the trigger is too wide, and even though you feel like you're exploring, you suddenly hit a cutscene and the player gets moved further ahead than you wanted. This is a big issue, and this game is heavy on hunting down collectibles, even more so than previous titles. There are also some segments that don't quite land for me. While I praise the game for constantly shifting and adding new gameplay ideas, this doesn't mean they all work perfectly. One section involving searching for water in a desert comes to mind here, and that's not a metaphor. It's about as fun as it sounds. Despite all that, Bayonetta 3 feels like the most polished entry in this franchise, and it is easily the best one. It's a spectacle of a game with tons of memorable moments and over-the-top action that gets the heart beating in excitement. You can tell that the developers poured their heart and soul into making one of the best action combat games they could, and I think it paid off. If you've ever been hesitant to get into the series, now is the time. You don't need any knowledge of the prior games to enjoy its story, the game is very approachable, and there is even a toggle to turn off some of the more adult portions of the game, if that was your issue. This is easily one of Platinum Games' best work, and I highly recommend that everybody try it out. A special thank you to Nintendo for supplying us a review copy of this game. I hope it has done them and Platinum very well. A special thanks to also our Patreons. They are appearing on screen right now, the $5 up tier. If you want to know how you can join them, just see our content early, or just to get your name up here in the credits, then you can take a look in the description down below. Let me know in the comments whether you are picking up Bayonetta 3, whether you were considering it, maybe you want to get it as a Christmas gift. Let me know down below. And when you've done that, hit that like and subscribe button so that you always remember to return to the source.